Well, welcome along to the podcast of the Shrimps Trust. This is ShrimpNet. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time. This week, we have two trust members joining us to discuss all the week's events, both on and off the field. So a warm welcome to our local business guru and MFC season ticket holder for 1,000 years, Michael Gibson. Hello, Posh.
Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's well. It's been an interesting week, definitely on and off.
And one of the Trust top dogs, and also season ticket holder and a man of many accountancy talents. It's Jack Steer. Thank you for joining us, Jack.
Thank you. Evening all.
And obviously it's Red and Stimpy, me and Joel, as per usual. We've taken a little bit of a diversion this week for the simple fact that there's been so much going on, both on and off the pitch, that we thought we would get some trust members on to maybe talk about more of the off-field, but we'll start with the on-field. Derby County, Pride Park. What could possibly go wrong, Joel? Oh, yeah, 2 penalties. Connor couldn't save either of them. And, did well for 44 minutes.
Yeah, I think actually, to be honest, actually, looking back on it, the thing that's actually upset me the most about that defeat, I mean, I can handle getting beaten by Derby, but the fact that Connor's penalty record doesn't quite look as shiny anymore, which is really upsetting. But still, 5 out of 8 penalties saved is still phenomenal, so it doesn't really take away too much from it. But in terms of the game, yeah, you're right. 44 minutes. Well, I think it might have been stoppage time that McGoldrick scored.
It was
yeah, for much of that first half, it was a really close game. Derby didn't really have very much. If you look back over the chat, maybe a couple of half chances, if you even call them that, to be honest. They didn't have very much. With a couple of moments in their final third, didn't quite create anything fully, but some dangerous moments, and it was positive. But I think, I like to harp on about tactics and stuff a little bit, but I don't really think that was really in play in how they won the game, Derby. I think it was just, look, they got their noses in front through a bit of individual quality right in half time, David McGoldrick, and
yeah, it was a good free kick.
It was a good free kick, and it just kind of goes from there. And then I think made a couple of errors at the start of the first half. They've got the backs up with the crowd behind them, and it just kind of goes from there with the quality that they have up front. And yeah, it's a bit frustrating how it's panned out. And the 2 penalties were pretty dubious. But at the end of the day, going away to a place like Derby, you really wanted to take them in 0-0 at half time because they've been in great form, but they're playing little on Morecambe, and if they're 0-0 at half time, they're going to be getting a little bit itchy, and that's maybe when you start to get a few tensions coming in. But McGoldrick sticking that free kick away just for half time, that just takes the pressure off them a bit, means they can kind of play a little bit more openly in the second half, be a bit more expressive, have a bit more momentum and confidence, and that's what they did. And I think, the quality shone through in the end. I think it was an interesting change from Derek, by the way, going to 4-3-3. I mean, it did. Looking at some of the reaction on Facebook, it did very much show that as a football manager, you just can't win. You have to get slated for these 3-5-2 or whatever he was doing over Christmas. It's too defensive, Derek. Can't believe you're doing this. And then he goes to 4-3-3 Derby County away, and everybody goes, I don't like it. It's too attacking. It's like, what can he do? But the formation was fine. We played really well the first half. The thing that swung it was a moment of quality from McGoldrick and the momentum swinging, and maybe a couple of decisions not going our way. And one final point to make on the game, I've been wound up this week by Derby fans, and not just Derby fans, Derby press as well, I think, which is particularly poor of them, to be honest, about complaining about the fact that Derek Adams highlighted the kind of the gap in our budgets. Now, yes, obviously, Derby can't pay transfer fees for people. Okay, we understand that. However, they do have to pay their football players a salary, and a wage budget is how you do that. And their wage budget is massively bigger than ours, so it doesn't really matter. Look, maybe the restrictions on transfer fees will probably be a hindrance for them breaking the top 2. Fair enough. Is it going to be a hindrance for them beating teams like Morecambe? No. At the end of the day, is David McGoldrick and Conor Horahan, are they going there for $1.5 grand a week because they like the idea of the project? No, they're not. So come on now, stop being ridiculous. You've got a massive wage budget compared to ours. Fair enough. You can't pay transfer fees. You might struggle to break the top 2 or make players as secure as you want to, but when it comes to playing a side like ourselves or ourselves or anybody else around this area, the area that we're in, it is comfortably enough to get the quality that you need to beat us. So, yeah, I felt that point needed to be made.
I'll tell you what, I've never seen you so riled.
I know, yeah. I just the blind ignorance of logic was just winding me up this week.
But it's a familiar shout. But when we say it, and I stand with Posh and the Barter card, and we lately we've been scoring a goal and turning around to history going, how are we not top of this Tin Pot League? Well, honestly, Derby can say that. We say it jokingly, Posh, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest sign of that, and I think probably the best bit for the whole day for me, was wandering in there and seeing 26,000 people. I mean, it was an extraordinary sight. It's a fantastic ground, and the atmosphere was amazing. That really summed up the difference. And it's ironic that only a few days later we're probably going to be in a situation where that number's going to be smashed at Sheffield Wednesday. But to see a fantastic modern ground like that just absolutely ramped to the rafters was just an extraordinary experience in its own right. A little old Morecambe playing in that environment. And I think there is an element of, and picking up a couple of things Joel said. So firstly is the press reaction. I remember when we first went to Portsmouth, and we were so used to going to grounds and just buying tickets on the day that when we'd pre-sold 4 tickets, the amount of patronising behaviour from Portsmouth fans was absolutely staggering. And and everything else, and the catering. I mean, they ran out at half time of food at Derby, and they ran out of food before the match at Portsmouth that day. And so sometimes there's a bit of a poor treatment of of sides, and it's like, well, the fact that we brought the 3rd biggest away attendance on that weekend was damned impressive in its own right. But yeah, not to have things like food and stuff like that, as basic as it gets. You're trying to sell to people, and you sometimes just feel that you just get that bit of poor treatment.
It
and then really
good. Sorry, I want to take the point there, because you're absolutely right. 819 fans made. Our average home gate is just a little over 4,000. So take that 819 into the 4,000 and work it out. Would Derby bring 5,000 to us? No.
Oh, you never know if we had the capacity. It's a little bit challenging to squeeze 5,000 in our place, but it'd be nice.
Hey, we'd squeeze it in somewhere.
Which wouldn't be able to squeeze in any of our own fans.
No.
And the second element of treatment was on the pitch. I thought that we got some very dubious decisions. I mean, the one of the penalties was clearly foot to ball straight away. Everybody could see it from our side, and it was just you've got to. And that it was a bit of a homer of a ref all the way, bits and pieces all the way through, and it's very easily to be influenced by a baying 26,000 crowd against little old Morecambe. I do think, as Joel said, I think if we'd have, they'll look at that first goal and think maybe we should have spotted that he was, what his positioning, and maybe had somebody to run onto him and close him down when that ball was laid off, and that could have made all the difference in the game. But I think once that went in, and the second, it was all over really. Heads went down, and we were overran. But to be honest, that first half was good enough until that goal. I thought we did extremely well.
A great experience though, Jack, surely.
Yeah, definitely. I think these are the sorts of games that we're in this division to see, and even though it was 5-0 in the end, there were still elements to the game that were good from us. As Joel says, the first 40 odd minutes, I thought we pretty much matched them. We certainly coped with them. But when we're playing teams like that, the first goal is always going to be key, and to concede on the stroke of half time, that was the killer really. If we'd have gone in at 0-0, you never know second half, but really we need to be scoring first. But yeah, nonetheless, great day out. As you say, 819, fantastic number. And I think everyone enjoyed it. I think you saw that at the final whistle as well. There wasn't a man that left the stadium in our end, despite the scoreline. So we'll enjoy it, and we'll go again.
And I do want to pick up on the Farron Rawson, a bit unlucky, maybe did get a little bit of the man there, but the first one, I think Simeon's got the ball there.
Yeah.
I think he volleyed the bottom of Simeon's foot.
Yeah. Yeah.
It looked like he'd done
He,
that.
he kicked Simiu. That's what I'm saying. I think Simiu got the ball.
Yeah.
Again and again and again, thinking, was he given that as a bloody? I don't get it. But anyway, my point is, we haven't had a penalty since Bolton last season, which was March. So we've gone nearly full 12 months. Obviously, we don't get penalties in sort of May, June, and July, do we? Because we don't play. But we haven't had a penalty since Bolton last season. So we've had dodgier ones than that not given. And that's all I'm going to say on it. So, but it just goes to prove Posh's point that when you've got 25,000 people baying for a penalty, that you'll give it. And I think when we look back at the season that we actually got promoted in League Two, we were saying many times that some of our away performances may well not have been enough to win a game if there was a crowd there, but they were, because there was no crowds there, and it did make a difference that season, if you remember. So you've got to take the rough with the smooth, I suppose. Anyway, talking.
The only comment I make on the game, really, I mean, second half that we made a huge amount of substitutions, and I think given the scoreline, it probably was a wise decision to give the people a bit of a run out and rest a couple or change the side a little bit. But I didn't on the flank. I didn't think Donald and Arthur was particularly the strongest of combinations when you've got a team absolutely running at you down there. It's not to overly criticise the players, but if Arthur didn't if Arthur had tracked back, or he had somebody who was tracking back, he was overrun by a winger and a fullback and Donald was stuck between the pair of them and didn't really quite know where to go in that second half. And I think he'll look back on that and maybe you've sometimes winning formations and things like that might. I'm not saying go back to a defensive formation like that, but we actually had a fairly good winning combo, at home. And whether you could have just carried that same formation and team as much as possible into that game, I'm not sure. Particularly why the changes are. Joe might have an idea more than me, but it just didn't. Sometime it worked okay, but it didn't seem to hold. Once we'd conceded, it didn't seem to hold.
Yeah, I think Derek alluded to the having proper wingers to offer a threat on the counter. I think he alluded to that in an interview at some point this week. I also wonder as well if it was partly as well. I think Derby can't actually. I'm not going to say what the formation Derby played because I can't actually remember. But I wonder if it was also maybe to double up down the flanks as well, having the winger defending, have two on the flanks. I don't know. Maybe just. Yeah, I don't know.
I see that, but you can see where it fell down as well. Was like Adam May was probably I thought our best player first half, but then but he also tracks back and he works back, whereas Arthur wasn't tracking back in the same way. And you need the winger to do both jobs really in that scenario.
I think you do. I'd have to watch it back to kind of really pull too much more out of it, but it was one of those. Maybe Arthur's lacking a bit of match sharpness because he hadn't played for a while, and I think he did. So I think he showed some nice touches in the first half and helped link up a couple of moves. But it was like you say, when they get their backs up and our heads drop a little bit, it's just tricky, isn't it?
We've suffered two very heavy away defeats where obviously early goal in the first 45 seconds at Ipswich and 52 minutes, 3-0 down with 25,000 Bain Derby fans with a dodgy penalty. It's like, I'm not going to complain. It's our battle is not with Derby and not with Ipswich. Our battle is to go beat the teams around us, and that moves us nice segue into Forest Green at home on Saturday. And obviously, a surprise in appointing Duncan Ferguson, who is. I saw a little interview where they were interviewing Dale Vince and Duncan Ferguson about giving him the job, and they appeared with two veggie burgers. If you've seen that, and the look on Duncan Ferguson's face is like, that looks really tasty.
I think he's given an interview when he said he's recently discovered that chips are actually vegan, which he was delighted by. And,
that was fantastic.
And then also apparently at one point he's also said, I think in that interview he said, "Oh yeah, the planet's warming up, innit?" Which was
honestly, it's quality. When he says chips are vegan, Dale Vince looks at him like, I'm like, are you serious? It's genius. But obviously, they're hoping for the Ferguson effect. But thankfully, It hasn't kicked in yet, Joel, so it's going to be an interesting 6 signings, rumoured to have paid, we think, 300k for the lad from Rangers. But interesting enough, let probably their most influential player go.
Yeah, it's a funny one with them because you do feel that Duncan Ferguson might have been brought in for a bit of new manager bounce with with the reputation he has, but it obviously hasn't worked. And well, it looked like it might have been working actually up until the 94th minute of his first game of against Shrewsbury, and then obviously blowing it there. And I think it was it Peterborough they had last time out, and that's always going to be a tricky game. So look, you don't want to judge, you don't want to read too much into managers because we don't know a lot about Duncan Ferguson as a manager. I think he's come with a bit of a reputation of being more on the passionate man management side of things, and I don't think you can really get away with that too much at League One level. You look at the rest of the managers in this division, a lot, they're all good tactical brains out there in League One, and the flip side, I think it got mentioned to me. I can't remember who it might be yourself, Freez. I can't remember, but apparently Carlo Ancelotti wanted to take him to Real Madrid with him, so he can't be an idiot. So because Carlo Ancelotti wouldn't have wanted to take him to Real Madrid with him if not. So yeah, he's obviously got something about him. It's just a little bit unclear. Like Derek alluded to it in an interview earlier today. He's coming in January. You've not necessarily got a lot of time to kind of imprint what you want to on your players. So it is always going to be tricky. Although I don't want to go too much into it because it just feels like I'll be putting a curse on things because obviously they're in a horrible run of form. They've lost their opening 2 games under the new manager. We're in fantastic form at home. We've won 4 on the bounce. We've not lost an 8 at home. So it just kind of feels like if I say too much, I'll jinx it and we'll lose. So but yeah, I feel obviously this is one that you definitely would be targeting to win because they're called 6 pointers for a reason, and I'm hopeful that we bounced back from Ipswich last week, and hopefully we can do the same against Forest Green after Derby now. So
they're hoping for the Braveheart effect. I said Braveheart effect there.
I think it is.
Yeah. So they're hoping
a few of them.
We're hoping that kind of hoping that Derek Beddoes fit to go to a back 3 and he puts Mellon up front, aren't we, Jack?
Yeah, well, I think first of all we can put that 5-0 straight behind us as we did the other week. Our home form is really good, unbeaten in 8. I think, to be honest, it doesn't matter who we're playing at the moment at home. We've got to take confidence from the way we're playing. We scored a lot of goals recently, played really well. They're not lucky results. We deserved them. There could have been further goals, I think, in some of them games. So, I think we'll be full of confidence going into the weekend. But we never take, any team for granted. And, we will have to fight for the 3 points. But, I'm sure we'll do that. And, we'll welcome him to the to League One football and the stadium. And, I know there's a lot of fans coming down as well. I know some people from work are coming down just to see him. But let's show them a performance as well and make sure they're coming back for other reasons than the opposition manager.
So officially Saturday is steak and ale pie only in the away end. I may have made that up. In fact, I have made that up, but it sounds good, doesn't it? They'll be desperate. All their fans will be desperate for a decent pie anyway, won't they? So there you go.
Apparently, the vegan pie is actually meant to be very tasty at the Mazuma.
Yeah, the vegan pie is very good. I've actually had it at the Mazuma, but I did have it with peas and gravy because the gravy's vegan.
There we go.
Gravy. So there you go. And
I hope Dale's paying a visit and giving us our credit where it's due.
Yeah, good man. Anyway, you'll be happy to chat to Dale Vince on Saturday, Posh, having an electric car and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, Dale. We're going to talk about it later, but you can't knock Dale Vince. He's a really successful businessman. The whole vegan stuff is something that he strongly believes in, but it makes it work in his favour. He's got that, he raises the profile every time for the football club because of it, and he does loads of other stuff. And you can't can't knock him, and when the club needs, everybody thinks sugar daddies and all that kind of thing. But he's invested a lot of money, unlike a lot of chairmen, into the ground, but follows his passion and belief. I think he's an extraordinary guy. I wouldn't necessarily, some of his interviews are a bit hard work, but you can't knock him for it. And hiring Duncan Ferguson, I personally, it's one of those that could really backfire. As Joel said, I can imagine him being a real, rabble rouser in the dressing room. You said about Braveheart, you can kind of imagine that kind of, that kind of speeches in the dressing room kind of stuff. But at this level, I don't think that's what wins you football games. I think it's what, it's the tactics, it's the structure, it's the, getting the best out of players. And there's a hell of a lot of good managers in this league who are very good, Derek obviously included. And it will be interesting to see whether he can actually rise to that challenge of being a proper coach as opposed to just simply a manager and shouter and everything else that his reputation's for, really.
So a couple of points which I wanted to make. First of all, I take your point about, he moved them sort of like 200 yards away from where they were, from the old lawn to the new lawn, which, and he's moving them again. Well, he actually didn't move them. They already moved when he got there, but he's building it. Is it the old wooden thing near the M5? Which is, et cetera, which is nice because at the moment it's the equivalent of our ground and giving the away fans the Berlin Wall, which I think is really, really, given the weather that we have in this country, I think that's really crappy, giving them the open side with like 5 steps of terracing and a crappy little, I think that's, that's beside the by. But secondly, obviously take the game where we actually went there and got our only away win of the season. And there seems to be something about Forest Green and injury time, doesn't there, Joel?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, you know what? I wish you'd mentioned that before because I would have had a little route around to see how many injury time goals they conceded. But yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, is it a lot? Yeah. So
the last 2 home games they've done it, and the last away game they did it.
Ooh.
Like, what's going on here?
I mean, you don't want to put too much stock, maybe sometimes in some things, but at the same time, when we got promoted, we had a fantastic knack of getting the late goals. When we went through particularly bad patches last season, the knack was conceding late goals, and it does take a toll. It takes the wind out of your sails as a side. So, yeah, hopefully we'll have the game sewn up by stoppage time. Though I'm hoping, we could well do if our recent home performances are anything to go by. But like I said, I don't want to curse it.
Well, if our recent away form is anything to go by, next Tuesday's match at Hillsborough, we're 5-0 down on aggregate after 2 games already. What could possibly go right? Me, being an idiot, decided, I think I'll go to Hillsborough. I have no idea why. Sheffield Wednesday, odds on, they signed 2 of Rotherham's better players that got them promoted last season. They've been scoring goals for fun. We held them for about 70 minutes at our place, and then they eventually plateaued, mainly because Barry Bannon had the freedom of Lancaster and Morecambe College. But looking at the FA Cup defeat, from that point of view, I don't think we were ever really in that. But there's points to play for, but our away form is at best dodgy, Joel. What are you expecting there?
Yeah, I think I'm expecting quite a low away attendance, if I'm perfectly honest. It's a bit of a tricky place. You can't really get to it on public transport that easily, Hillsborough, and definitely not on a Tuesday night. And then obviously it's Valentine's Day. So good luck anybody who wants to swing going to Hillsborough away on Valentine's Day.
I think Sally's going out with a boyfriend, to be honest.
That might be why. Get you out of the house. But yeah. No, yeah, I think it is going to be an extraordinary tough, a very, very, very tough game, as we've seen in recent weeks with Derby, with Ipswich, and going to these places. I think you have to say if we get anything from it, it's a bonus. At the same time, we'd do a win, not a win, but some kind of positive result in one of these games. So, yeah, you live in hope, but again, I think we've said it so many times in recent weeks. It's not going to be these games that define our season. If we can get some points here, that'd be absolutely lovely. and it'd be we catch a few other teams out, just keep us clamped at the table a little bit. But ultimately, I couldn't care less if we lose to Sheffield. Well, obviously I will care a little bit, but I'm it's all about Forest Green, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But so come on, then I'm going to put you two on the spot. Are you preparing a candlelit dinner for two? Not between the two of you, obviously, but candlelit dinner for two for your betrothed or your beloved, or are you like me, being kicked out of the house and go to Sheffield Wednesday because my boyfriend's coming round?
I think it'll be
I'll let you know
follow
if you've
for
got
me.
space in the car, I think.
Yeah, I have got space in the car actually.
All right, yeah, okay, I'll let you know.
Jack, what about you?
Yeah, just I follow for me, I think. So I've done that.
Well, if she
I've
lets you
done
go, it's not so bad, is it?
no, I've done Sheffield Wednesday once, and it wasn't a great experience, to be honest. So I'm not rushing to get back.
If it's any consolation, I've been there twice to watch Chelsea and once to watch Morecambe, and I haven't seen any of my teams score there yet. So yeah, could be fun. But like I said, like you're exactly right, Joel. That's not going to define us. The Forest Green game is the more important one because that puts them, it puts us more points ahead of them, etc., etc. We've got to keep. And if the home form, as Jack has alluded to, carries on going, we've got nine home games left. So that could be 20, 21 points there maybe, pushing our luck a little bit. And all of a sudden, we beat Forest Green on Saturday. You're looking at nearly 50 points there. That should keep us up.
Yeah. Me and Joel actually were talking this about on Twitter. I said 48 was probably the mark you've got to aim for. I think 48 will be enough. But if you look at recent history, probably 47, 46 is probably is maybe good enough. And we don't seem to be in the same repeat as last season. That suddenly the likes of Doncaster and Crewe just falling away really quickly. This time round, there seems to be a lot of investment. Obviously, you've talked about the 300k that's been spent at Forest Green. Burton have obviously invested in a few. Aki less so. They got that striker in from Arsenal, but other than that, really not a lot. And their game against Port Vale, a bit of a weird one. I think it was their only shot of the game. So we've got a hell of a lot of work to do. But like you say, I think if we could pick up, I think 8. Look at the home games. We pick say 6 home wins out of those 8 games. It'd be amazing if we could do something like that. And then it's just then what can you scrap against the better sides. I'm afraid though that will not be against Sheffield Wednesday. So just have a nice night out, get some decent chips on the way or something like that. Have a couple of pints and enjoy it, and then just hope.
I think what we do need to do though is start finding a way to pick up some points on the road. I think that's obviously a concern. Obviously not necessarily against Sheffield Wednesday, but we've got some fixtures coming up that we need to be getting some points on the road. Otherwise, we are relying on that home form continuing. And I think, if we want to be comfortable towards the end of the season, we do need to find a way to get points, because at the minute we're struggling a bit.
Yeah, I think
looking at
sorry, go on.
No, just looking at games like MK Dons and Fleetwood that are coming up, and MK Dons have obviously been on a bad run of form, although seem to be turning a bit of a corner at the moment. But if we go to MK Dons in the same way as we did in the Cup and just capitulate, we're just not, we're not going to play. You've got to go there with real intent and with a kind of level of aggression and everything else. Sometimes we show at home and really get in teams' faces and everything else, put a really good high press on and make people work and you're there. And if you don't go out with that intent, it just seems like we're not going to get anything. So it's got to start coming. But what Derek's like, all of a sudden, a bit of end of season games, a bit like Charlton last year would be nice, and suddenly we start eking out a few points where we can see weak teams and find the weaknesses and pull them apart when we need to. It'd be great.
Just a sad stat for you that our record against MK Dons is scored non-conceded 6, which is even worse than the Sheffield Wednesday one. So I'm like, Anyway, never mind. We move on. And obviously, with what's been happening off the field over the past 3 months, I think it's about time. And one of the reasons we haven't got anybody on from the club this week is because I wanted to discuss the prospective Sarbjot Johal takeover. 20 years old tycoon A couple of things I want to say. First of all, the Daily Mail led with an article about a month ago, which was poor journalism in my book. Said that, and it's been picked up by two other newspapers this week, saying that Sarabjot Johal has beaten Tyson to the club, meaning Tyson Fury. And as we all know now, Tyson Fury very kindly went on TalkSport, for those that don't know, and advertised that the club was for sale. That's what he did. He said, I am thinking of buying it. And as we now know, he was at the club at 9 o'clock in the morning after saying, I'm not thinking of buying it. I just thought I'd give you a plug. And he attracted a buyer, and that's where Sarabjot's come in. So any journalist worth his salt, if he'd picked a phone up, could have found that out. But obviously that myth is still being peddled. So that's the first thing. Secondly, the beautiful Daily Mail, who I read every day, decided that the club was on offer around 20 million. If anybody from the Daily Mail is listening, are you on ketamine in your office? Have you ever picked a phone up and asked a question, a decent question? That's just crap journalism. Because again, completely and utterly untrue, nowhere near that. So those are the two things I want to point out. But then obviously we come to Saab himself. Vitanic. You were trying to get a bottle of that, Joel. You couldn't get it. Tell me.
Yeah, obviously it's a company where it's a soft drinks brand that is associated with Sarabjot and that he owns. But obviously you look at it and you go online to the shop and you can't buy it, which is odd, I think. But I think we've got Jack and Posh on the podcast who are here to talk about the financial things a little bit more and give probably a bit more detail than I can on these kind of areas.
Because I mean, let's be fair, chaps. Obviously, everybody's a trust member. This is important stuff, isn't it? We've been in a situation not that long ago where Joseph Calla and Diego Lemos were in serious competition to buy the club. That was under the previous owners, and then obviously we've got the situation where Bond Group owners at the moment, and that doesn't include Miss Moneypenny. But from that point of view, we're a bit. The board itself are running the club, but it's up to Bond Group to decide who they sell to and how much they want for it. So we're all a bit hands tied. So when Sarabjot's come in, if his intentions are real, tell me a little bit, Posh, about his companies.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, I think you've got to take a little step back a bit. I think, first of all, there's a good reason why the football club's up for sale. So you've got to bear in mind that, the club is up for sale, and there's probably very good reason behind that. What's happened at Worcester Warriors, etc. Don't want to speculate about Jason Whittingham and what he's involved in and everything else, but he's the sole owner of the club through his company. And at the end of the day, he wants the club off his hands. Now, in my view, Jason got very lucky. He bought the club because, as far as I'm aware, that obviously the lending to the club wasn't paid. So he effectively picked up the club for nothing, pretty much. I don't know. I think that's largely accurate. And then weirdly, the pandemic came around. So and actually, for a club like Morecambe, we got loads of grants and everything else, and furlough money and everything else, and that potentially offset a lot of the losses that the club would normally have had. So that was a pretty good one. And then you look at the players that suddenly sold: Carlos, Sam, Jack Kingdon, I think it was, and Leif Davis. There was around about £1 million there of money to prop up the club. And if you like, that's all gone now, and I don't think he's in a position to pay. So first of all, we need a buyer. Yeah, so there's a pressure on us to find a buyer and get one.
So well done, Tyson, on advertising us then. Yeah,
so you've got every buyer that comes through. I don't think we can look down on a potential buyer. I think we've got to take things at fact, rather than, because I think there's a lot of emotion around this. There's a lot of things about having a go at him, and you never want him to be anywhere near our club. I think everybody who comes forward with a legit, what they might feel is a legit offer or whatever, needs to be inspected on the value of what's there. So I think that's the first thing. And then, there is the general approach to this, which is the smell test. Does it smell right? And fundamentally, you've got 2 or 3 factors for me. The first one is, why is a 20-year-old lad who should be, I know I'm not being sick, he may not drink, but he might want, you'd expect him to be down the pub or playing football with his mates or doing something else. Why is a 20-year-old lad who's trying to build a company thinking that he wants to go at a football club? And especially when he lives in Edgbaston and there's absolutely no connection whatsoever with Morecambe, why this club? And to me, that just doesn't make any sense. If you look at all the kind of owners of football clubs, yes, there'll be Americans who come over and think, that you'll buy Wrexham because, you can see a fairy tale. But you've got, you look at their business model, it's a brilliant one. And you know where their money comes from. So that makes sense. And that's the second side of it. Where's the money? And we can talk about Vitanic and lovely drinks, I think, or whatever. But, and there's other businesses like Saab Capital and all this kind of stuff. But when you go through all those companies, and we don't want to go and bore everybody with the details, and Jack will talk about this more, but you look at the assets, you can find it all on Companies House, and that's where everybody goes first of all. You go and look at Companies House, and you go and have a look, and you see what's there. And then when the cars turn up at the stadium, you can go online and see whether those cars are owned or whether they're leased and different things. And when you go through all this stuff, it just doesn't add up. If he's alleged to be putting £5 million down to buy the club, where does that money come from? And if that's through a business, legitimately, where does that money come from? And there is absolutely no evidence that there is £5 million of cash being generated through his businesses to fund those businesses. So the EFL will ask that question and say, where's your money? Where's your evidence? Where's it come from? Where's it? You don't just put £5 million up. It's got to be like, how are you going to fund the club? Not this year, the rest of this season, the next season, and so on and so forth. Where's this regular money going to come from? And at the moment, I can't see, and nobody else, Martin Galadine, anybody else, all these other good people are out there, can't see any evidence whatsoever. So he's got to come up with some pretty good answers. And I'd be fascinated to know where that is, because none of it to me makes any sense whatsoever.
And I presume, Jack, you're of a similar take on it.
I think so, yeah. I mean, the first thing to say is obviously, we've been in this situation before. So I think that is why there's a lot of nervousness, amongst all supporters over the situation. In terms of the information that's out there, which I'm sure everyone's sort of read on Twitter and the like, as Posh sort of alluded to, that there's just nothing there at the moment. So there's no clarity, there's no substance behind anything. The companies, you can follow the company trails throughout Companies House. They're all relatively new companies. In a lot of cases, there's no published accounts yet because they're that new, or where there are accounts, they're technically insolvent, so they've got a negative balance sheet, i.e., they're not profitable in any way. So at the moment, there's sort of no clarity on public record as to where that wealth may have accumulated, whether there's that wealth to support the company. I think we understand that the club is a loss-making entity. Over recent years, it hasn't been, but for the large part, it is a loss-making company. And then someone needs to sustain those losses, any owner, ultimately. So,
from my reading of it, roughly five to £600,000 a year losses.
That was the standard, published results prior to the pandemic. The position now, we don't know. I think the next set of accounts are due quite soon, actually. But again, we're always sort of 9 months, a year behind the published results, so we're not seeing an up-to-date position at any point. So yeah, it's the uncertainty, and I think everyone just wants a bit of clarification on that, really, which is why, as a trust, we put the statement out that we did earlier in the week, acknowledging that information that's out there, acknowledging the position that every party is in, so we know that the directors sort of ultimately have no say on, this is the directors of the football club, have no say on who the club is sold to, really. It's in Jason's hands. Equally, as Posh has explained, we know Jason needs to sell the club, has to sell the club, wants to sell the club, and so that has to happen. And then, you know, our understanding is that it's with the EFL to do their due diligence, and we've kind of got to trust that process. You know, it's not on us to prove where South Capital's income or cash is. It's for them to justify that and give that evidence to the EFL, and then do the due diligence to sort of back that up and give that confirmation that they're satisfied that he is a fit and proper person to run the football club.
I think you know, that most fans and lots of fans that I speak to, and I'm sure it's the same, you know, you have the same conversation, you know, something somewhere has to be put in place for him to pass the test, and that's fine. And as we've said, I want to be fair and I want to be balanced. You know, we're not here to sort of like make decisions on the evidence that we think, because we haven't got any evidence. But that's part of the problem. In the fact, a little bit of information can obviously be a dangerous thing, can't it? Because you can make the rest of it up and think, you know, and I you know, it's got to be right for the reasons that I outlined before. We've had Joseph Keller and we've had Diego Lemos, and I don't want to go through that again, because that's kind of where the trust came from, isn't it, Joel? Because we got together because those two people put us in a situation where we actually thought, hang on here, if they get in charge, we're going to be knackered.
Yeah, obviously that's what's happened in the past, and as a trust, it's something we are very, very wary of. And I think we are fortunate that we have got people on board with the trust who are going to work hard, and they've got the knowledge to be able to try and hold people to account. Now, obviously, same as the board of directors, we're not going to be the ones who make the final decision. And like you said, as much as we've got to hold people to account, we do need to give people a fair say. But ultimately, I think everybody in the Shrimps Trust is on the same page that we do want to do what we can to try and strive for the best outcome for the club. And I think at the moment that thing is doing the due diligence and making sure that we do ask the right questions, which we do have people doing.
I think just to jump in on that, sorry, Freez. I think it's worth reiterating the sort of protection that the club has got in place through the JB Christie Trust.
Yeah, that's right.
I have listened to a few podcasts just before, actually, that sort of I didn't understand that position. So I think for anyone that's listening who doesn't sort of understand that, you know, the ground is protected by that trust, and there's a detailed.
It's a covenant.
It is, and there's a detailed explanation on the Shrimps Trust website, which I would refer anyone to, which explains that position. But that has been a huge backstone, I think, for the last few years, in that no one's really able to do anything with that ground. You know, that the land is not owned by Morecambe Football Club Limited. It is for Morecambe Football Club, and there's a key distinction between those two things, and will be forever.
Yeah, I mean, I was involved in the establishment of the Shrimps Trust, and and I think I largely wrote that page because I was determined to get it up there as almost as a warning message, because we didn't have it. You know, it was like somebody could have just come in and think, well, I'll asset strip. And I think, you know, there's a feeling that could have happened in the scenario that we're talking about. Why did Bond Group come in and, you know, okay, they picked it up because of potentially a default on a loan or whatever, but you know, it was the couple of days before we were playing Coventry in the last game of the season. We could have been relegated, and everything else. You think, why would somebody buy a club or take over a club at that particular stage? And you're thinking about, you know, asset stripping and everything else. And, you know, it was alluded to in the Price of Football podcast. I think that's probably the one you were referring to. I think for anybody listening who's more, you know, for all Morecambe fans who are listening, I think this is why the Shrimps Trust was set up by the people you see here and by everyone else, because the football club has got its hands tied at the moment, as in the board of directors of Morecambe Football Club Limited. They look after the limited company, and they're there to protect that and do what they need to do to make sure it trades effectively. And their hands are really tied. You know, there's question marks about, you know, a piece of an article that's put out, or an announcement put out, a statement by Graham, and you know, you don't know the circumstances of why he had to make that statement. You know, my understanding is that Mr. Joel put in a small amount of money as equity, which is a small amount of money that, you know, maybe is goodwill. And then that was then tied to, you know, what were the conditions that were put on that statement? You know, what did Morecambe Football Club have to say in about that and everything else? And it's a very difficult position to be in as a board of director of the limited company who, you know, they're doing their absolute best to protect things. Us as supporters, as long as we stick within the letter of the law, we don't libel anybody or do anything else, we can ask the difficult questions. And nobody, when Joseph Keller was around, asked difficult questions. There was a group of people on Shrimp's Voices who went and, you know, started to speculate and show all the detail about him and about Lemos and everything else, but nobody as an organisation asked a question. And what the Shrimp's Trust has done brilliantly, in my view, and as since it started, is basically have a really good website that lays out everything, all the detail, but then has got 1,000 Morecambe fans together and said, we together ask the difficult questions. We're the ones who will get out in your faces and tell you whether you should, you know, actually, are you a good guardian of Morecambe Football Club, as in, you know, not the business, but us as a club and what everything that we stand for. And that's the real value in the Shrimp's Trust. And I'm staggered there's not more people who aren't members, because it is just, that's our lifeblood. That is the thing that, you know, puts us all together and helps us stand up to anybody that we, you know, who potentially could destroy what we have.
And like I say, the difficult questions that need asking are, you know, Saab, have you got the money? And if so, where did it come from? Because there's no evidence here. And those are the two interesting questions. Yeah. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
And the board of directors can't publicly say that. They can't state that, and they can't do anything else because they've got to do it. But we can, and it, you know, it's great that Shrimp's just doing exactly what it was there for to do, which is protect us all from the club.
There's doing some research, and there's a couple of things that have come up. Obviously, there was this week the rather interesting the SST gentleman on Twitter discovered the website that disappeared, which appeared and then disappeared, which I'm not going to say too much about, but you know, we think Saab is claiming that's not him.
Well, it's just for clarity, there's two websites that have disappeared. So the first one was the Saab Capital website, and that appears to have gone. And then there was a second one, which was found by a guy on Twitter, and allegedly Mr. Johal claims that's nothing to do with him. And, you know, we can't say whether that is or not. No. It just seems a bit weird that when these issues have been raised about both companies, or various things, or miraculously the websites disappear within a short time afterwards. And again, you know, that smells a little bit weird, you know, and everybody can make suppositions about that. But again, it just, you know, on their own, yes, he may not have owned that website or whatever he claimed and whatever, but the Saab Capital one was undoubtedly his, and that's gone. So, you know, why pull down your website? Why avoid inspection? And why block people on Twitter because they go and say things about you or something else? You know, if you're credible and you've got something to say, you stand behind what you do, you know.
It's true, yeah. And therein lies the problem. And the other thing that's been brought to my attention, which is quite interesting, and I've double checked it and it's correct. And the club actually came out before Christmas and in a press release said that the new owners, prospective new owners, had submitted the paperwork to the EFL, and the club actually, I've looked back and they did actually say that. And yet in the Lancashire Evening Post last night, that's Wednesday as we're recording, they reported that Saab was saying the paperwork's going in later this week. So
yeah, it could have been partly, you know, we don't know, you know, they could Jason Whittingham could have told the board of directors that the papers had been submitted, or somebody could have told them, but then it didn't happen.
Yeah.
All we know is
why would the club release a statement saying that they think it's been done, and then Saab says you're doing it again?
Possibly.
I'd love to ask him myself. I would love to ask him myself. And obviously he's free if he wants to come on here next week onto ShrimpNet. We'd gladly talk to him and see what he has to say. But obviously he hasn't got that right at the moment. So yes, it's speculation. But as it stands, you know, I think we'll leave it with the smell test, and something doesn't smell quite right. But
yeah, the one thing I would add is, I mean, obviously, you know, that, you know, we can speculate and we can say everything else. The going back to the very first thing I said was that Morecambe Football Club needs to be bought. And I think the problem, in my view, is possibly that the amount of money that's allegedly on the table is significantly more than others are willing to pay. Now, if somebody's offered, say, I'm pure speculation, there's nothing to do with the actual numbers. Let's say somebody offered £2 million more for Morecambe Football Club than somebody else was prepared to pay for it. Would you hang on and wait to see whether actually they get through? And because Jason, ultimately, if somebody goes and puts X millions of pounds in his bank account and he then walks away through that business, happy days for him. Yeah. Now, the problem for us is how long this process goes on, because that undermines everything. That, you know, it can undermine the club, it can undermine security, and a lot of that happened with all the speculation around Joseph Caller and everything else, and it really, you know, people are thinking about their jobs and everything else. And the one thing that we have to do is get this cleaned up. So there's a bit of pressure on Jason as well, because if Jason also does not think that there's going to be a credible bid come forward, or the paperwork has not been correctly submitted to the FL or whatever it might be, then he needs to just have a bit of a think and say, you know, maybe I need to look at other bids. If there is other bids on the table, maybe I just need to take a step back, because if I don't close this deal now, how long is it going to be? You know, are other people going to walk away, do whatever? He needs to just have a little think and say, you know, what's in the best interest of not only of himself, but, you know, in terms of getting a deal done and closed, because, you know, he could lose the opportunities that potentially other opportunities in front of him. So if he's listening, that would be a nice little thing that you could have a think about, whether somebody else is actually going to cough up or not.
It's a fair point. So back to, well, before we go, you know, where do we go from here, Jack? What happens next from the trust point of view? Well,
we have actually opened dialogue with Saab Capital, so we're hopeful of organising a meeting. You know, as we sort of said in the statement again earlier in the week, you know, we do want to ask the questions and obviously invite the opportunity for answers. You know, and that would be the case for any potential purchaser of the club. You know, we're a small family club, and you know, the fans are the biggest stakeholder in that. So, and we're representing those. And you know, if there's any serious owner out there, they would speak to us and you know, hear our side of you know, of things, and you know, hopefully we can get some clarity on everything.
Well, you must. Well, obviously, Joel can keep us pinned with how that's gone on, and hopefully, we'll get some. You know, hopefully, you'll get some interesting dialogue with him, because that would be illuminating for all of us, wouldn't it? And hopefully, it could either work one of two ways. It could put our minds at rest, or it could get us to speculate even more and ask even more difficult questions. We shall see. But going back to the on-field activities. Forest Green at home on Saturday. Get your tickets now. I quite fancy a vegan pie on Saturday. What about you, Joel?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, go topical for the visit of Forest Green, and yeah, I think just talking of on the pitch stuff. Obviously, I think it's probably worth mentioning Derek and the players and all of this. You know, they're not stupid. They've got eyes. They've got phones. They've probably got some idea of what's going on. Yeah, despite all that, they're knuckling down. They're cracking on. I mean, obviously, look, bad away defeats at Derby and Ipswich, which were kind of very likely to happen regardless of things. And at home, we've seen the amazing turnaround performances. Derek and Greg, they probably would have liked to have a bit more financial freedom in January, but they've done a fantastic job bringing in some really good players, and people like Sameo and Crowley and Mellon, and obviously now Osterfield coming in as well late in the window. So I think we've got to give a lot of credit to them and how they've handled difficult circumstances, and how them and the team don't seem to have let it get to them, and they keep cracking on doing their job and doing it better. If any, they're doing it particularly well at the moment. So yeah, I think it's just important that we give a bit of credit to them as well.
At least to a shock 2-1 away win at Sheffield Wednesday.
There we go.
I'm the worst tipster in the world. I've ruined it. Sorry, Paul.
It was a brilliant transfer window, and I think in the circumstances, massive credit to Derek and Greg. I mean, it's an extraordinary job that they've done. You know, the quality of players, Dan Crowley, obviously, you know, with what we've seen from him. I can't wait to watch him again on Saturday. But yeah, Forest Green, Duncan Ferguson there, low roof, a lot of noise, you eating a vegan pie, and that's definitely going to be a brave fart with a vegan pie, and we're all going to be in trouble off the back of that one.
With peas and gravy, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I'm slightly worried about that, to say the least.
Yeah, true. Yeah, stand well clear. So do let us know if you get any joy with Sabjot. Obviously, I hope he turns out to be real. I hope he's got 50 million in the bank. Because my thinking on it is, obviously it's all right buying the club for 5 million, but if we're losing 500,000 a year and you want to invest on building another stand and you're going to need a damn sight more than 5 million, aren't you? But that's just me. I'll keep buying the lottery tickets. Thanks to Posh, thanks to Jack, thanks to Joel as always. Join us again next week for more illuminations from ShrimpNet. This has been episode number 24 of the season. Keep your chins up. Forest Green at home. We can win. See you next week.